Ninja swords banned today. I mean, this is a tragic story, and our thoughts are completely with the Kanda family, and we're speaking to them very soon after 7 o'clock. And tragically, Ronan Kanda lost his life at the hands of these killers and this sword. But if you see a picture of some of these ninja swords, I don't know whether we've got those, Sam, in the gallery. When you see these, I think everyone at home is looking at these going, why on earth would anybody want these anyway? Why are they even
what is the purpose
being made and available? It's shocking, really. Now, Salma, when you were working in the Home Office, you dealt with some of this, didn't you, on the sort of banning of some of these, or at least restricting the sales of them?
There's two things. There's one is directly to your question, why would you have this? And it's the same as the sort of ban that came in around zombie knives as well, which were also used in very violent crimes. Why would you have them? I mean, for some people, getting a ninja sword, it's an artistic piece, it's decorative, but then it doesn't suggest, you know, why so many people would have them and basically using them in violent crime.
People do collect them, don't they?
Yes.
And they are beautiful and they have a historic and symbolic significance for many people that isn't negative in the way they've been used.
You wouldn't expect there to be a sort of a mass movement of collection of ninja swords.
And actually, it's people not actually necessarily putting them in a display cabinet inside their homes. It's the same with guns, you know, heritage guns. I mean, when I was a Home Office Minister, tackled this area as well. We've been trying to clamp down on this for years, and it seems online, you know, another version of a pretty horrible knife is put out there to be sold. The key issue here is people taking these as well and carrying them in the streets to do harm to others.
Well, this is the point. Right. So from today, ninja swords will be banned. It will be illegal to possess, manufacture and import or sell any of these deadly weapons. Now, we're speaking to Minister later, and they're claiming that in terms of robberies, knife crime is down. But we still know on the streets that stabbings and, you know, serious injuries are caused by knives. Just by banning these, is that going to help, do we think, or will they just simply use other knives or find something else?
Look, it's the perennial problem, is that if you ban something, there is going to be, you know, an opening for somebody to do something creative in order to get themselves a weapon. You know, when I was in the Home Office, we did the Offensive Weapons Act. That was about preventing the sale of online of knives. You know, you can't go into a shop without having some, like, sort of form of ID or address, but it doesn't prevent it entirely. And I think, yes, banning it is going to prevent immediately, potentially, deaths. But we have to get real about the fact that there are certain cultural elements to it, whether it's kind of gang crime or whether it is motivated by other drugs offences or other forms of crime, and that's what we need to crack down on.
I think these units are having an impact, and that is welcome. I mean, I think in the West Midlands, for example, knife-related robberies are down by something like 20-25%, overall around, I think, 6-7%. So I think it's important. Clearly, there isn't just one tool in the box here, but we should be... I think we should be proud that as a country we are more restrictive than others. Let's look at America, for example, on the sale of guns. And I think anything we can do to challenge the manufacture, the marketing of these guns, particularly knives to young people, is welcome. But it's not the only issue. And I know families who have lost loved ones due to their child being stabbed, often, you know, very often just caught in a sort of situation that they were never part of, have also said it has to be a much bigger approach than the banning of knives. But I think, you know, credit to the mothers and the parents and the families who've campaigned for this, because we're talking about it. We're talking about it and sending out a message how dangerous this is.
Well, Pooja Kanda, the mother Ronan, and his sister Nikita are going to be on the programme after 7, and it's obviously the loss of beloved Ronan haunts their life every day, but they say they wake up every minute thinking they don't want another family to go through this. And by this coming in today, there is some sense, hopefully, that horror has been mitigated. But as you say, it's not the solution to everything, is it? No. Look, it feels like every day we're never far from an immigration story, doesn't it, on this news panel? And today, new figures, 25,000 migrants have arrived in small boats so far in 2025, the earliest point in the year that we've ever reached that number. So heavy indication it will only go up. And not unrelated, the Times and the Express are reporting that, well, not unrelated in the emotion that generates, perhaps completely unrelated in the actual figures, but foreigners now account for 1 in 8 of the total prison population, with specific numbers on the front page of the Times of the vast proportion of those being serious crimes, including sex offences. This is going to fuel a general sense, isn't it, that the UK is being invaded by people, criminals that we don't want here, and it's not going to help those that are trying to fight for a different approach.
Yes, and the government will and should be worried about some of these figures. On the boat situation, whilst there has, I think, been deportations up by something like, I think, 14% since the last general election, it demonstrates how difficult this situation is. And I wouldn't be surprised if, with a general election last year, some of the organised criminals behind some of these boat sailing to this country and trafficking of people thought, well, here's an opportunity to maybe ramp up before more severe measures to stop this come into being. So I think there might be something in that in terms of what's happening.
So do you think there's things underway which will see the numbers go down?
I think what has happened, which is to be welcome, is more discussions with the French about what they will do to actually hold people there. I think there has to be more done on that front. There has been much more focus on disrupting the sort of supply chains, the boats and everything else that form this organised activity. But this is massive. Rwanda didn't seem to be the option, so what are the other options?
Yeah.
Keir Starmer is signing deals with Albania and other countries to deport, but it is about making sure that we do have legitimate reasons, but this isn't.
It's just worth saying, though, that out those migrants that do come on those boats, we know well over 70% of them do get asylum, and their cases are accepted. So there's nothing to suggest that the vast majority of them are the ones that end up in prisons. But
I want to make that clear, actually, because I worry that I suggested that. I'm not suggesting
I know you weren't.
I think what it does is, is prompt the emotion that people see those two statistics and think numbers are going up. Oh, my goodness, our jails are full of people that are connected. And what is the behind that that stat? 1 in 8 of total prison population are foreign nationals.
It could be as a result of the fact that there's a difficulty in deporting them. So what happens with what is known as an FNO, foreign national offender, is once they have served their term, then they are deported back. That is still subject to legal appeal process, and in some instances that can keep you trapped in a certain legal process for a long time. So the deportation aspect of it and the release of those FNOs back to their home countries is a really critical part of making sure that actually that backlog's cleared up. But just to say, I do think the bigger issue here is the fact that if you've pledged to smash the gangs and bring the numbers down, there has to be a question for Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper at the Home Office as to how, yes, they've got a plan, and I would give them at least another year to make good on that plan, but it doesn't feel good when those numbers are coming out. So how are they assuring people that actually here's all the things that we've put in place as a result of these numbers? Because there will be people. We've got protests, all week, outside hotels hosting migrants.
You're right, Salma. And the clock is ticking. There is no doubt. I understand immigration, and by immigration I mean what we're talking about: the boats and the people coming across. The numbers of failed asylum seekers who are still in this country is the number one issue ahead of the NHS and the economy. But on the prisoners, one of the reasons is around foreign nationals. Experts say their age is a lot younger. More young people commit crime. That's one issue. A third of these prisoners are on remand, so they haven't had their procedure processed. But Shabana Mahmood, who is the Secretary of State for Justice, is looking, which I think is a really good idea, and because this build-up, by the way, did happen on the previous government's watch in the last 14 years, instead of waiting till the end of the sentence to initiate deportation procedures. She is looking at 30% through their sentence, making it happen, and also looking at 10%, because that's been the problem in the past. It's been too slow to get the procedures underway to make sure that on the day they leave prison, they're on the plane or whatever it is, back to their country of origin.
Look, I mean, you know, just on the prison issue, there's no defence of anybody who's been tried through the justice system and ended up in prison. However, we know that just from ethnic minorities in this country are disproportionately, perhaps some of them, in prisons, and that's because they come from inner-city areas where perhaps they are living in high-crime areas and their job opportunities might well be low. So there's a little bit of that, I think, probably with this as well.
Yeah, but a proportion of this is serious crime.
Yes, of course.
This is sex offenders, violent crime.
No, absolutely.
Prison.
Now, the thing on the migrants who I find really, and we have touched on this before, is that Labour's policy when they were in opposition was what lots of campaigners are calling for is more safe and legal routes. They've tried this. Let's try and put a Band-Aid on it. Let's try and be severe on it. And let's try and get the headlines in the right-wing press. But it's not working for them. But when Yvette Cooper came on this show when she was opposition, she used to say, it's about safe and legal routes. She's been pictured at campaigns and protests defending and promoting these, and now the whole sort of rhetoric seems to have changed. But inevitably, that's where that's the sensible argument, is to go back to more safe and legal routes.
Well, I mean, of course you've got to have...
Because you're never going to stop it.
Of course you've got... Hang on a second. Of course you've got to have safe and legal routes. But you can't avoid the situation that we have got people who have come into the country, maybe through a legal route, for a job or as a student, and then they stay on beyond what they're allowed to do. And then they, often disappear in the system, and eventually the creaking machinery of government and law enforcement catches up with them. There are other people who have actually been given a place to be in this country and then have committed the most horrendous crimes, and then they're deported, and then they're coming back in. Only a few weeks ago, there was an example of someone who was deported for serious offences and then came in illegally. Yeah. So there are real issues here that have to be dealt with. And I think what's great about the British public, who are very much open to people coming from around the world, recognise the value that migrants can bring. I mean, we have generations of families here who made that journey. Okay. But I think amongst ethnic minority communities in this country, as well as others, they are concerned at what they see as a sort of porous situation in which we're not tackling the problem when people are not doing this in the right way, but also where people commit offences and should be, quite rightly, returned to their country of origin.
Can we unpick a little bit the headline in the Daily Telegraph's front page? Labour bid to silence migrant hotel critics. Now, what this appears to be, they call it secretive Whitehall spy unit, being used by the government to target social media posts criticising migrant hotels and two-tier policing. And what it appears to be is that it's something that came out of the COVID era and sort of conspiracy theories surrounding vax and anti-vaxxer campaigns. And they started monitoring and then sort of raising the information to the tech companies, saying, you've got a lot of chatter on this, not ban it, but keep an eye on it. And the suggestion is that secretly, this is now being used to look at the sort of chatter that's surrounding, people who are anti what you were describing, the protests around hotels where migrants are being, or refugee and asylum seekers are being housed. Now, is this something that I could imagine in a different debate we would say was a good thing? That the government was taking steps to sort of hold tech companies accountable for spreading nasty stuff, you might describe. But in this situation, it's been depicted as a sort of a political bit of machinery to silence free speech.
This is always a huge problem when it came to regulating social media platforms, which is where do you draw the line on freedom of speech and who is responsible? Do you want Elon Musk to be responsible about where you draw the line on freedom of speech, or do you want the Prime Minister to be responsible? So there's always been a difficulty around getting this right. The issue that I have with this, and look, if I was on the inside, I'd probably be trying to use this same method because I would be worried about disinformation and misinformation.
Whether it be about this or about...
Or anything.
Child abuse or anything,
but I think a purist would say that it's not the state's job to have this behind the closed door conversation. if you've got an issue with something that's there, you should have something that's government branded, that's open, that says, we refute this, or put a community note on. This is not something that is accurate, and people can be left to make the decision and judgment. Misinformation, disinformation is a bad thing in our society. We have to combat it. But this kind of story that says there's just a backroom deal being done between government and tech companies, it starts to fray that way.
Caroline,
come on.
It's the Telegraph
Yes,
who call
it is
it
the
a
Telegraph.
secretive spy story. But actually, you look into the detail, go, well, there's a department. It's not really a secret at all. They're called the Counter Disinformation Unit as part of the department, and so they're not trying to hide it.
I honestly
think
feel...
it's the Telegraph skewing it, going, oh, look what they're
this
doing.
is a much ado about nothing. I mean, the unit was set up by the previous Conservative government. They set it up during the lockdown.
Yeah,
hang on a second. They set it up during the lockdown period because they were looking out for people who were anti-lockdown and were going to undermine the measures from Boris Johnson and his government about how we should behave during that pandemic.
They didn't have to look too far,
No,
did they?
well, there you go. I mean, you know, perhaps
exactly
they had an inquiry into that. Yeah. But the thing is here, we've just been talking about, obviously, knives and the marketing of them.
Yeah.
I think it is, you know, of course it's got to be proportionate here. But I think it's absolutely right we should recognise that the use of online tools by people who want to cause harm, influence unduly young people, but also organise in terms of illegal activity. One of the reasons why some of these right-wing groups are so successful is that they can use social media as a flipping great big loud hailer for everything they do. And these tech companies have got to be mindful of that.
And let's not forget, you know, the Southport riots and what happened there. And a lot of that was people online getting their information from online, and rumours and conspiracy theories all evolving. I mean, the question comes, we always come back to this, is regulation on some of these social media sites. I mean, Musk can kind of get away with anything, really, on X at the moment. TikTok, we've got absolutely no control over at all. And they are now becoming some of the biggest platforms in the world.
They are.
This country. They're bigger, you know, bigger than sort of traditional television.
But hold on.
But yet we have no regulation. Is that right?
The Online Safety Act, what is the regulation that has come into force on this? The reason the government can speak to tech companies and ask them to look at misinformation, disinformation, is because of that regulation. That's why it exists. The question for me is that appropriate? And do we have enough sight as to what the government is asking for? Because all it takes is for one person who doesn't like what's being said online to go and have a quiet and eradicate any crime.
These tech companies don't care. They just want the profits. They have got algorithms. They are very, very clever people.
That's why there's the Online Safety Act.
That's one question.
Oh, well,
I'm just thinking about people at home right now. Mums, OK? Mums are at the moment getting their breakfast ready. The kids are on their phone, right? OK, well, Mum's getting breakfast and getting the car ready, whatever. Do mums, and you're all mums, is it up to you to regulate what the kids are watching, or do you think that it's down to government? Do you sort of trust the government to go, my kids are on the phone, I trust that Keir Starmer is looking after this while I can get my breakfast ready, or is it up to the kids? Is it up to the mums themselves?
It's up to parents. It is up to parents to enforce some rules around this and to use on their phones. Well, first of all, otherwise they're given a smartphone to a very young child for a start. That's another question. But there are controls on these phones, and there was a survey a couple of weeks ago where they showed that actually, you know, a huge number of parents weren't activating the controls to stop their children seeing stuff.
Okay.
However, we can't just police ourselves.
It's a minefield.
We need a police force, and we need a cyber police force to make sure that actually we're not having undue harm coming our kids' way.
OK.
Well, we're talking to Dame Diana Johnson, our policing minister, later on. I'm going to put that to her, Caroline. And I bet she does a sort of a slow eye roll as to how she's going to tackle it. But maybe not.
I'm available if they need some advice.
Oh, here we go.
At any
Looking
point.
for work.
Shall we talk a bit of money? So, look, The Guardian is reporting in the morning that the Treasury should consider a wealth tax. And this is according to former Shadow Chancellor Annalise Dodds, who's now Institute of Directors, isn't she? And she says business confidence has plummeted to its lowest level since the Brexit referendum. So how is going to taxing increase business confidence, or is it just necessary to get the money in?
Look,
and is it even likely the Treasury?
It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen, certainly not, and I don't think in the way that Annalise and other voices in Labour are suggesting. I think something like 1% of the richest people in this country pay something like 25% of the tax share. So you've got to think about, you know, where we're going to get more tax from, how it's going to happen. What you need to do is build the economy so people are earning more, paying more through the normal way of doing things, but also businesses are providing tax back into the exchequer as well through VAT and other means. I doubt if Rachel Reeves is going to sit down today and say, Annalise has been out there talking about this. I might change my mind. I don't think it's going to happen.
Salma?
Could I just say, I just
Yes.
stripped Annalise Dodds of her MP status. She's former Shadow Chancellor, but still an MP. I apologise.
No,
if I appeared to do that, the producer said I...
Salma, are you happy to pay more tax on your millions?
Well, if only I was wealthy enough to get into that bracket, that would be a status symbol, wouldn't
But I
it?
think it's where the bracket falls.
Exactly.
And it's the same as we, you know, it was released yesterday that they were considering in terms of paying energy bills, that we might have a situation in terms of our energy bills and looking at the way that is funded so that people who have more pay more for their bills and those that have very little get to have their homes warm. And on principle, everybody might think, well, I don't want people to be freezing to death. But I don't feel like I can afford it either.
Right.
So it's where it falls. Are we talking billionaires, or are we talking people that, you know, are scraping by?
But also, the reality is, like, a lot of rich people have left the UK. There's, as much as you people talk about there being a brain drain from America, lots of Brits or wealthy people that lived in the UK have gone. And so that idea of a progressive tax, which is the notion that if you have more, you pay more, that was in place here. So now the top is people who probably do well in terms of a salary, but are already quite heavily taxed, are already spending a lot in terms of the cost. So to have a wealth tax, I don't think that's going to improve business confidence. I think that's going to say, OK, we're going to have another contraction in the economy because there's just not going to be that much money going around. And, you know, I'm classic Conservative thinking. Is the government going to spend my tax money well?
Yeah. I support progressive taxation. It's interesting about you saying about the energy prices because if you look at the standing charge, which has been increasing a lot over recent years, when you look at those on the lowest incomes, particularly those in fuel poverty, when it comes to the standing charge, they're actually paying a bigger proportion of what they've got than
Which always seems so unfair.
So I mean, look, I don't think a wealth tax is going to work, but there is something about inequity in the system when you've got the poorest people paying a bigger proportion to these charges compared to other people. So I think that's work can be done in that space, which is absolutely right and should be looked at.
Yeah. Should we talk about baby names? Which normally, you know, you do this story, this is a cute little story about popular baby names, but I've noticed something about it. So what they've identified is that boys, the most popular baby name for boys is Muhammad, and the most popular baby name for girls is Olivia. Now, the thing about the Muhammad, I was hearing it all yesterday on not here, on other news broadcasters, and it was almost a throwaway line. Oh, you know, but I feel like it sounded to me that people are going to go away thinking that Muslims are having loads of children and they're taking over the country. And I think for some far-right conspiracy theorists or far-right politicians, that might suit their narrative. But I just wanted to explain the thing about Muhammad is that if you're a male born into a Muslim family, not every bloke, it didn't apply to me, but if you're a male, quite often you're given it's a given name. You're given a name, Muhammad, at the beginning of whatever your name might be. So, and that could be every son in the family. And it's because of the Prophet, and it seems to be quite religious and reminds you what religion they are. But they're not known as that name. And I know people who have got Muhammad at the beginning of their name. I don't call them Muhammad. I'll call them Amin or Wahid, which is their second name. And quite often you don't even have surnames. I mean, my surname is actually my dad's name. You know,
Really?
Culturally, from a Pakistani, there's no such thing as a surname.
So your dad didn't have a surname
My dad
either?
didn't. Dad just had a name, and his brother would have a name. But because they were from sort of village backgrounds, everyone knew which family they were from.
Right.
Everyone just knows, you're from that family.
So your
People
dad
know
is
each other.
Ray?
Yes, exactly. So yes, exactly. Yeah,
Every day's a school day, isn't it?
But it happens in other faiths as well.
Yeah.
So, you know, my husband is from a Catholic family.
Right.
And, you know, there's quite a lot of his relatives who are Francis, Mary, Anne Mary, and they have Mary as the sort of middle name and things like this. So it's not unusual amongst faith
would put
communities.
this out, thinking, well, hang on, shouldn't we just give a bit of context? Because it can sound sensational that people are thinking, well, go away thinking, oh, there you go, Muslims are taking over.
Yeah, but I mean, I think it's important that you set that context. I think Mohammed appears in the list a couple of times with lots of different spellings.
About 6 different times, I think.
This is like a different thing, but I think we've got to be careful that it started out as a list to kind of remark on what the most funny names are or what people are choosing, and it's a reflection of our kind of cultural norm.
There's an interesting one that's coming through.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
No.
Isn't Noah in there as well, though? Is it
Noah
Noah?
and also Oliver. But what isn't in there, Caroline, is Kia. For the first time in 30 years, no boy baby born in this list, so last year, was named Kia. However, a surge in Nigels.
Wow.
I mean, it was only 5. It was only 5, to be fair.
That's a surge. Well, there was none before.
There was none before. So immediately, as you say, it was created as a list as a bit of fun. But does this show that people are more inclined to want their little baby boy to be a Nigel?
Why would anybody want to name their child after Nigel Havers? I just don't understand.
I know.
Well, I actually think that it's quite... I mean, in previous years, the Boris name went up quite significantly. So maybe it's just people are capturing it in their imagination and it's not necessarily a political reflection.
Right, it's because it's suddenly... But then Keir's very much in the thing.
Do you know any other Keirs apart from Keir Starmer?
I do, actually.
Do you?
Enough. I know someone who married a friend of mine. But what I find really weird is even by journalists who, you would think would know better, is how many people spell Keir wrong.
Oh, I spell Keir wrong.
Instead of K-E-I-R, K-I-E-R. And it's like...
he spells it wrong. We're spelling it right.
And when you see it in print, and you think, what's going on with the editors on these newspapers?
What it is, it's because we all learn I before E, except after T, not after K.
We are out of time. Let us know. Would you name your child Nigel or Keir? We'd love to know. Actually, what's your favourite?
And if you are a Nigel or a Keir, come and tell us how your life has been, including Sir Keir Starmer. We'd love to hear from you as well, and Nigel.
If you have been affected by anything you've heard.